Good afternoon from the Institute for Manufacturing in the University of Cambridge. It's 1 o'clock in Britain, and I've been told that we've got people from other parts in the world as well. So I'm hoping that you have a more gloomy, a more nice day than here, because it's raining slightly in Cambridge at the moment. Today's topic: don't fall prey to your business ecosystem failure. This presentation that I'm going to give relates back to research that we've done in the Cambridge Service Alliance over pretty much the last 4 years, and it's kind of a one part of the research that we're doing and from this one research stream that I'm going to introduce to you in a moment. It's kind of a part of the outcome, really. Where we've been working very successfully with other businesses as well to kind of detect and understand further and better how business ecosystems or the wider ecosystems for businesses actually work and prevent failure within these business ecosystems. So what we're going to do today is understand the definition of a business ecosystem in the first place. I'm going to get to that in a moment. It's slightly problematic. Understand the value and range of stakeholders in ecosystems, partners, external influences, and so on and so on. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples around that, and some basic information about business ecosystems in the first place. So basics on how you can go about and actually understand them and potentially use something like this already within your firm. So as a background, we've started to understand that the surroundings of firms really are changing. So a lot of companies are switching from output focused, hence like either product focused to service focused, or then they change to outcome focused. Hence, they're far much more driven to basically design solutions or to offer solutions to their customers. And this may be part of past sales, or maybe as a sales vehicle as well. Hence, instead of selling something, you actually offer a solution. But so very much in different business scenarios. And what we've noticed is that firms, first of all, don't really exist as single firms anymore in that sense. But there's a lot of partnerships and actually business ecosystems. Then competition generally becomes competition. So often, if you think about your company and what your company probably offers, and if you think about the most fearsome competitor, and you think about the fact how often you probably actually cooperate with them to deliver something together to one of your customers, then that's actually very, very often, usually. And then it changes from a product delivery to complex solution delivery. Hence, instead of actually selling products, a lot of the time, complex solutions are being bought by customers. Top-driven hierarchies, where the board level gets involved, to local and flat hierarchies. Hence, execution teams make decisions based on budgets, or based on contracts, or based on making things possible. From managing to engaging, so it's less of a managerial approach, but more of an customer-centric and engaging relationship, and then more from a contract to a relationship. So very often now when I talk to firms, they turn around and say, yeah, we don't really want to have business contracts in that sense anymore. Obviously, we need them to define exactly what's going to happen, but we actually want to have a relationship with our companies. So this is kind of a little bit of a backdrop of how we see the world and how we see the world changing in general. So what is it that an ecosystem actually does? And I've put on the right-hand side, because I'm obviously I'm still an academic, even though I've got a large industry background. But it's kind of, for me, it's a sleep well definition, right? So so if you don't agree, like kind of, you're very welcome to like kind of make that voice, or like kind of put input. On the left-hand side, there's a chat tool, so you can write questions as well if you have, obviously, or if you have input. I'm going to try and react to that as well. So I see this as follows. So if we look at the top level, really, then there's an economy in the first place, right? So this, you may consider this as worldwide. You may consider this as the UK in the first place, or as any country, really. And then within this economy, we have different markets that exist, and within these markets, we kind of we kind of tend to define specializations of markets. So pharmaceutical industry, the animal health industry, heavy assets industry, and so on and so on. So really depends on how you see this market and so on. So we can nicely slice them and box them. And then we have business networks, and these are loosely coupled organizations that basically sometimes work together or influence each other in a wider sense. But usually business networks tend to we talk sometimes about the network effect. By existence, they may be learning from each other, but they tend to not do business with each other. So there's no what we would consider a direct value exchange, and there's no contracts or monetary value exchange in between them. And then we basically consider business ecosystems where multiple enterprises or parts of multiple enterprises, because it doesn't have to be the whole of the enterprise, is involved in delivering an outcome, and I'm going to come to the definition in a moment, to a customer or to multiple customers. Then underneath that is obviously the enterprise as well as a unit. So like if there's an enterprise that you may consider as a business ecosystem or an ecosystem in itself. And then below that there's different programs, projects, and then but in the basics really there's a financial transaction in the first place. So this is kind of a where I put business ecosystems in general. So how do I actually define this? In, like I said earlier, business ecosystems at the moment in the press and as well in business is used by very many people, and this is thrown around in many occasions. So what I normally tend to say is it's a network of enterprises, firms, and organizations which, through both value exchanges, aim to provide value and value propositions through a particular perspective. So, for example, a customer, which represent more value than one of these single firms could create individually. And of course, there's a sharing of, and there's a capability and a resource part in there. So we talk obviously about every company has a resource, a specialist resource, which they can offer on the market in the first place. So what I describe this as is, if you think about a value, and I'm going to go into a couple of examples later on, and I kind of talk about, normally tend to talk about looking through a lens, right? So you have a very, very particular view. If you look through a value which you receive, then you may or may not be aware how many organizations are actually involved in creating this value and how many organizations may have an influence on this value in the first place. And I'm going to go into an example of that in a moment. So if we consider the past and the present, and then potentially the future, then obviously in traditional value chains we always saw as something very transactional and linear, right? So there was a supplier who supplied to a firm, and this firm basically did a value add, and this value add then was passed on to someone else. Someone else did some value add, and then by the end of it there was a customer, and this customer bought and potentially destroyed the value, or however you may want to see the use of this value. So today, these, on the right-hand side, these networks or these ecosystems actually have become far much more complex, right? And within ecosystems, I normally invite to actually turn around and say there's certain partners that you have that have an influence. There's influencers that have an influence. Influencers, we're going to get to that in a moment, how we can define them. But this may be maybe a government, this may be a community, this may be an NGO, you name it. So these have an influence on your business, and they may actually have a positive influence on your business or a negative influence on your business. And what we are basically calling for is to understand who these influences are, and to actually really understand how they have an influence on your business, and then internally obviously set up your firm in a way that you can use this influence in a positive way. So you may actually think straight away okay, I'm slightly confused, and this is absolutely fine. I'm confused most of the time, but then I'm an academic anyway, so I'm allowed to. And I'm going to give you a very basic example. So in the past, I've worked with a firm. What they do is they produce pharmaceuticals. These pharmaceuticals are then basically used in the animal production, so in the food production industry. So there was one case where they had the following situation. They had this, this what they call a technology, hence something that you can apply to an animal. And this obviously has a certain effect on the animal. And so there is a way of like not using this, not using this medicine, so to say, but by using this medicine, there was an influence on the animal, which was there was less pain on the animal, hence less stress. There was better food conversion on the animal when using this technology versus the old way. Hence, there's a better growth rate of the animals in the first place. We're talking about food production, right? There's production parts in there. So better food conversion, which meant as well that there was less leftovers, less dung coming out, which means less CO2 production by the production in the first place. And the stress and the pain was basically that the old way of doing things would involve a physical cut to the animal. So we can basically see this as like a whole row of animals coming through, and they basically get physically cut, which then obviously may or usually leads to an infection within the animal, because obviously you can't put a plaster on that and keep this very, very clean. We're talking about animal rearing, right? So what normally happens is that after this has been done, the whole of the herd basically gets an antibiotic. So hence as well a very strong reference within the research and the background research that was done that there's a large drop in the use of antibiotics. And the first question you're asking, this is a company that does animal health technology or like pharmaceuticals in the first place, and they're obviously going to involve antibiotics as well. So they don't want to cannibalize their own business. But by selling this material, I was just indicated that maybe my audio may be gone, so I'm just going to get some technical help. Can you hear me? Oh yeah, I think actually it's still working. Yeah, sorry for that. Back to the topic. There was an indication in the room that my audio would not be working, but as it looks, it seems to be working fine. So the influence on the animal as well as the influence on the firm was throughout positive. So you would be thinking that this would be something which the market would be uptaking very, very heavily and very, very strongly. So it would be something which is a no-brainer to buy. And even within the company, like I said, started earlier, within the firm itself that would produce these medicines, they've worked out that they would be gaining far much more margin by selling the new technology rather than the old, the antibiotics. So what had happened worldwide was the following. First of all, in Australia, they had a very, very large uptake. In North America, there was a large uptake, so that seemed absolutely fine. In South America, it was better uptake than in North America, but throughout Europe, there was hardly any uptake. And you're wondering why. So, and they've been doing everything that is written in the book. They've done absolutely correct. So absolutely right things to do in the first place. So what they've done is they had their marketing channels, which are the farmers and animal rearing, like kind of industry companies in the first place, and the veterinaries. So they've been addressing those, have been explaining them all the pluses of this thing. They've been inviting them to marketing events. They've been incentivizing them to basically use this new technology. They've been basically giving a story to them of how positive this is to do in the first place. Central Europe, still no uptake. So you're wondering what happened. What we did was they pretty much tried everything in the book to get this right, and we started to actually map the ecosystem with them together. We started to map what actually happens lower down in the supply chain, who's influencing what happens when, where, and so on and so on. And what we came out with was that shops, so the shops that would be selling the meat later on had very strong regulations and rules in what they would be buying as in how the meat was treated, and what they would be then passing on to their customers. And because there was a food scare, or there were food scares in the past, specifically within Europe, this was a very, very different way of handling and dealing things rather than in the US. So in Central Europe or in Europe, there were food scares. There were food scares around wrong types of meat in the supply chain and so on and so on. So this was very, very negative for the brands. And normally, if there's a headline somewhere saying brand X food scare, or like something wrong with the food, the customers don't really go there anymore and say, oh, I'm just gonna not buy the meat there anymore. But they don't go to the shops anymore. So hence, because it's a low margin business, it's very, very critical for them not to have something like this. So they just would not want to change. So what we did was we basically refitted, thinking about the value exchange. We basically changed the whole of the way that the communication was done in the past towards shops and towards the shop's management. And this really helped and increased the ability of this pharmaceutical to actually implement this new technology within the European market. So within a couple of months later, they already had one chain in a Central European country that would actually let the food based let this meat that is treated with this new technology, let that into the market. Actually, the contrary, they actually decided they're only going to take this meat that is treated like this into their market, simply because it's far better for the animal and it's better quality. So you can see that there's a lot of power, or there can be a lot of outcome by looking at your ecosystem in the first place. And this was really an example where this was very strongly built around a case where there was a problem which you could actually identify. So the second opportunity to use business ecosystem or ecosystem mapping is to kind of understand and innovate a little bit, or like to understand what you should be doing next, or what areas you should be doing next. And we've done a workshop in the past where we worked in the airline industry with the Aerospace and Technology Institute in Britain. And we've basically defined that there's business passengers, there's leisure passengers, and there's cargo within the airline industry. So, and this is where this looking glass basically comes back into place. And we've really started to say we don't consider cargo, because cargo is a different way how business runs and who's involved in this business ecosystem. But we just looked at these business passengers and leisure passengers, and we looked through the looking glass of what we can see, and then basically started to develop this business ecosystem. So we basically started to put all the end customers, the central companies, suppliers, partners, competitors, and all forms of influence. And this is a reduced map to basically try and be a little bit easier, or like less complex. And in the middle, you can see premium airline, low-cost airlines, value airlines, and cargo airlines. So like I said, the cargo airlines leave out. So we basically differentiate between value airlines. So this would be the different brands, and then low-cost airlines, you know which ones I'm probably talking about. And then premium airlines, which go up to basically business class only airlines. There's a couple of them as well, which probably we are all not really taking, but they do exist. So what we've done is basically we've looked at this, and one thing that actually we've looked at these, and then we've basically turned around and said we're going to cluster all these different members. So as an example, and this is really open, research partners, producers, buyers, and users, which you can basically cluster into different parts. And this is really it's got nothing to do with the methodology, so there's not a limited amount of opportunities there, but there's a vast amount of opportunities that you can do, and this is domain knowledge. So when I lead a workshop like this, then I normally tend to turn around and say, I don't really know about your business, but I'm sure we can find some form of consensus. So what we ended up with was this. And you see one very interesting aspect there, which is there's customers, then there's interfacing partners, then there's the airlines, aircraft and parts recycling, and pilots and crews, and so on and so on. And there's kind of different different groups of firms that are involved. And they may have a specialist task. So if you basically zoom into aircraft production, then obviously there's a vast amount of firms that are only looking at aircraft production, or then through life of the aircraft, there's different companies that are involved as well in maintaining aircrafts and looking after the aircrafts in the first place. Sorry. So what we've done next was we looked at the money exchange, and we looked at who actually gives money to whom. And obviously, like, you know, there's partly there's firms that are involved in this, but they don't actually have direct value exchange within the airline firms or within the airlines in the first place. So, for example, on the very left-hand side, you can see the Department of Education, which is very, very important if it comes to actually educating and training engineers, as well as operation management people, as well as aircraft security, cyber security, and whatnot. We all need to actually keep this industry or this complex business ecosystem actually running in the first place. But they, of course, have a very limited amount of value exchange within this with this ecosystem in the first place. But one interesting thing is, if you're looking at the business passenger in the first place, or the passenger in the first place, the leisure customer, and the airlines don't actually normally, or most of the time, have a value exchange directly as well. So there's booking platforms and comparison sites and travel agencies that are actually in between them. Hence, like, and if this was done, I think 4 months ago, last week I saw an article in one of the economics papers, and they were saying basically that the airlines more and more get further away from their passengers, and soon it's going to be that you not really buy a seat in an airline anymore, but just a seat. And this is already what you can see there. So some of the participants were actually quite worried about this, because it just means that it's the airline itself is actually glorified seat allocation organization. So what we did then is we basically went through and prioritized a couple of value exchanges where we were very interested in, which the participants really considered to be important. And I'm just going to go into one to just like kind of show you a little bit more the thought process behind it. And this is number 3, so digital media platforms and airlines in the first place. So we turned around and said, what do these airlines actually do in the first place? We actually just seat allocation firms now, right? So there is actually an opportunity to put with new technologies that is arising, to put digital connections in every airplane that there is. So via the Atlantic, there's still certain problems to actually have full-fledged internet connections, but over air over land air traffic has in the meantime got very, very good connectivity. So there's high quality opportunities to have connections there in the first place. Do apologize again. But digital media platforms actually have a very strong interest in actually getting into that airplane, because what you in the end of the day have is you have customers that are sitting in a seat for like 1 to 6 hours, however long you think, or you would like kind of define it. So for the duration of the flights, and what are they? They are usually bored. So the thought that we had was, how could we actually build a system, or how can we get some form of value out of the people sitting in a seat and actually creating value by having airtime, so to say. So one of the ideas that was put in there was, obviously you could do some shopping, so you could link up with Amazon, and as an airline you could allow people to shop in flight, and you would be getting a cut off. As an airline, you would get a cut off the turnover that was done within the airplane in the first place. You may be able to do your grocery shopping or define your grocery shopping in more detail, and so on and so on. So there's a vast amount of opportunities of how you can use this time that the passenger has in the first place within this airplane within this airplane. So how do we get to this in the first place? How do we get to this depth and detailed like kind of thought process, as well as innovative process, really, to think about these connections in the first place? There is by defining that there's a value proposition in every firm that there is in there. So every company that is within that network or within that business ecosystem has some form of value proposition, something that they're actually good in, right? So then within this network, they take some form of risk and they deliver some form of value. And that what they deliver as value to the business ecosystem may not be what they're actually really good at. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that they're bad in what they deliver, but like kind of there may be a trade-off, or there may be something different. So they may be delivering something which they're classically very, very well known for, but lately they've really been known to do something else which actually extends the opportunity that they can bring to the business ecosystem in the first place. Hence, you may be able to use that, for example. So a discussion like this usually tends to actually bring more detail to this discussion and more information to the discussion. Then the second thing that we do is we think about value. So classically, what we do is we think about value creation of the company, hence the business model. But we think that it's just a quarter of what actually happens between B2B customers. Well, actually, we know that this is only a quarter of what actually happens between B2B customers. Specifically, if we're talking about solution design and service design, but as well with products. So if you think about it, you do something, right? You do something, you create some form of value, and then you're handing that over to your B2B partner or to your customer. If you call them B2B customer or customer, that doesn't really matter. So you may be creating, so I'm talking to you guys now on this chat, hence I am creating value. If you capture this value and you understand this value, then this is one part. But the next part that needs to happen within you is that you're actually doing something with this information that I've given you, and you actually apply it within your business, right? Because otherwise, what we've done is I've created something, you've captured something, and then like kind of nothing happened, right? So you need to do something which then, in the end of the day, creates back value, and I can then capture this value again. So as an example, we may have a question and answer session later on. So you may ask a question, and you may be indicating to me via an email saying, "Hey, this was a really good session. Can I get some additional information?" We may be actually developing a business relationship or some form of exchange out of this, which may be useful for everyone. So this is really the thought process. And obviously, this is not just to your business B2B partners, but then as well to your B2B. To your customer of your B2B partner or your B2B collaborator. So this is kind of the thought process in general behind this. So you should really start to understand your customer's business, business model to be able to create and cater the right value to them, so that they can ideally capture all the value that you create, and you don't have value exchange loss between them. And then they should be creating, obviously giving you feedback, obviously potentially giving you money, enabling you to do new things, not just with money, but maybe with opportunity as well, and so on and so on. And this is really what they create for you, and they give it back to you. But obviously with what you create, and they will be aggregating that with other value, and then they will be passing that on as well. So this is really, if you look at this network, then every single line that you see there is really a value exchange. It's not just that someone actually gives some form of value to another partner and then runs away or like can fall away. So what we do here is really there's two things really that like, and there's obviously very many things that we do, but with this specifically, we run workshops with this, where we actually define ecosystems together with firms, and we do workshops, as you can see in the picture, as an example. And we have a one-day ecosystem strategy course as well, where you can join us on the 22nd of November, 2017, and basically join us for a day. And what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to talk many more tools that we've developed over the couple of years that I've been doing research in this area, and basically give you some practical tools which you can use to really understand what is happening within your firm, optimize this value exchange, and optimize your position and positioning within your ecosystem, or then as well influence and define your ecosystem to have strategic thought within your firm to use your external B2B partners and influencers. I think this pretty much brings me to a close. There's a couple of references here where you can see a couple of I've tried to make them more easier to read things rather than the academic publications, because I know that we tend to write a little bit complicated. But there's a couple of them online on Cambridge Service Alliance .eng.chem.ac.uk, or then if you're if you're googling my name as well, you should be finding some of the publications as well. And there's a reference as well. So if you want to buy some book, there's Value Creation Through Engineering Excellence, which I think is a very, very good book. There's one of the chapters in there as well about unpacking value exchange, so specifically the value exchange between two partners. That puts me to pretty much half an hour. There's one thing that I wanted to mention very briefly as well. We have a 2-day executive course, which is the Shift to Services, where business ecosystem mapping is a small part of that. So we are talking throughout these 2 days. We're talking with our participants, hence with you guys, really about how can you design services and how can you design solutions and bring your firm and company further within your service business. That's on the 15th and the 16th of November, and I've been indicated that we're going to send an email to you if you participated later on, where we're going to detail this again, so in case you didn't catch it. Any questions for the moment? There's on the left-hand side, there's a question box where you can enter questions if you have some.
So one question that's just come in is how long does the ecosystem mapping process take?
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking the question. Very clever. And I completely forgot about that. So the question was, how long does a process actually take? How long do we take to actually have a workshop like this? So normally what we found was very good to have an overnight time in between. And this is because it's a relatively complex process. It's a lot of material and thought process that we tend to work with people. So what we do is we try and take as many diverse backgrounds as possible from one company or then from multiple companies and basically put them in one room, and then we map the whole ecosystem. So overnight is a good thing. We have run workshops in 1 day, but ideal, I would say, is really 2 days to get a really good outcome with a lot of new ideas and opportunities and new positionings in ecosystems, or then as well strategically building a new ecosystem and defining new partners to work with for a new solution.
And do you have any comments on how this approach or ecosystem mapping applies to SMEs?
Yes. So to SMEs, this is a very, very good question. I'm doing a lot of research at the moment on SMEs, and it's a very interesting thing, because obviously SMEs tend to think that they kind of they're not really applicable for these things because they're made for big companies. But this is actually very, very important for SMEs, I think, and I go into detail why. I think as an SME, you tend to have not as much opportunity to invest simply because of the amount of cash flow that you tend to have. So you may have more flexibility rather than a large company, because you don't have to actually give everyone a reason why you wish to do something, and like if you get the freedom of money, if it's spoken, maybe easier. But you obviously have a certain limited investment amount. Hence, a good strategic thought process and a very detailed strategic thought process about like kind of setting up your wider ecosystem and your influences is actually a very, very good idea. Because what we talk about is, of course, not only to think about your positioning within this ecosystem, but as well how can you create value out of this ecosystem in a wider sense, and how can you make the most out of your positioning between potentially these larger companies that may appear to boss you around a little bit, or like however you may call it. So I think actually this is very, 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 very good to be used within SMEs, and I would welcome any SME to join the day course as well. It would be I think it's very good because it's a very hands-on tool set that we're going to be going through and talking about.
Who should be involved in the process, and can you do it with organisations bringing other organisations from your ecosystem in to provide additional insights?
Yeah, very good question as well. So who should be involved in an ecosystem mapping workshop, and can you bring other organizations in as well? So we've done both basically, and this is really a process of where you're standing with this. If this is actually something which is very critical for you as a firm, hence you don't really want to externalize it yet, but you want to do some planning on how you actually how you may wish to design a new solution. For example, you may not want to have like kind of everybody in the room who you may wish to include, or you think at the time at least you wish to include, because you may make decisions that you do something in-house throughout the discussion, or you may want to exclude them afterwards because you're understanding afterwards that you're not actually getting the right amount of value out of this firm potentially. So we've done workshops with firms being involved, and this is more on the sense of where you actually want to really understand what's happening, or potentially as well what other people can be delivering. But then as well, we've the most of the workshops that we've done really were more on thinking within the company and strategizing within the company with, like I said earlier, diverse backgrounds within the company. So the more diverse the backgrounds, so technical people from internal as well as sales and service marketing and so on and so on. So it's a good set of different backgrounds is a good idea.
Got another one here from Brian. I'm an SME selling through distribution. How do we get feedback from influencers and decision makers on product or service purchasers? They don't have easy access to those people.
Yeah. So the question was, I'm an SME selling through distribution. How do we get feedback from influencers and decision makers on product service purchases? We don't have easy access to these people. So this is very, very good because one thing that obviously always happens is if you're an SME in the first place, if you're at the lower parts of the supply chain, so to say, you tend to not be able to access the end customers of the supply chain in a classical sense. There's one technique on customer satisfaction that we've, well, actually there's two techniques on customer satisfaction that we've researched within the Service Alliance in the past. One of them, there's an executive briefing on this, is thinking about your your frontline employees. So thinking about like how you can use your frontline employees to actually find out about what your customers actually think in the first place. Hence, then you can take this back and kind of make it easier for your internal people to actually react. This is only to make the exchange of value between you and the next firm to kind of make this more seamless. And the second study that we've done is this is based on the thought of that there's touch points between companies. Hence, there's a purchasing department, potentially there's a technical service department, there's a sales department, and so on and so on. So we define these as touch points, and we basically have an internal round of these touch points and look at these touch points, and then we have we basically speak to your customers and let them define and like kind of critically analyze these touch points. So then to bring these things together, interestingly, in the cases that we've done, usually has shown that there's a lot more work being done. This is what I said earlier, internally, and a lot more worries internally than there is actually really to be worried about. So there's two techniques that I just mentioned that basically give this opportunity to really have more thought about like kind of your direct customers in a B2B setting, right? So this is as well applicable, obviously, if you're a small and medium enterprise, as well as if you're a large enterprise, of course. And a general way is when you think about your wider ecosystem and the influences within your ecosystem. Have a think. We're going to go into this more detail into the. We're going to think about this and talk about this in more detail on the day itself of the executive program. But if you think about 4 levels of integration and value exchange, and this is like kind of relatively complex for the amount of time that we have left now, and I'm going to throw that anyway. You've asked the question, you got to live with it. Sorry. So the first level is as a firm, right? So what, and this is not, we're not talking about I give you something, you give me money back. We're not talking about a product exchange. We're talking about an indirect value exchange, right? Indirect value means I'm not paying for this. Every organization within this business ecosystem has a reason to be there. Without this organization, there would be an imbalance within the ecosystem and someone would be potentially taking this place. This may be an NGO, this may be like the government and so on and so on, right? So regulatory environment. So if you think about an NGO within your area, you can think about what they actually do as an organization. What is it that they do as an organization? How do they create value as an organization? What is it that they're good at? You're actually doing as an organization, what do you actually give them as indirect value? And what do they actually give you back? With an NGO, with a pharmaceutical example that I mentioned earlier, this may, for example, be that you are actually servicing a market and they actually look after the market and try and influence regulations within this market. So you may be working with them, maybe influencing you and helping you to actually legitimize or towards your customers, increase your internal innovation by them having input on telling you how to do things better. That doesn't mean that you have to do everything, but this may be a good this may be a productive exchange, right? So they may be giving you information and you may be giving them information that they don't know about. For example, regulatory parts that they may not be aware of, production problems that they may not be aware of, and so on and so on, right? So they may be very, very diverse parts. So this is only on an organization level. The second level, and I said I'm going to mention 4, the second level is basically on a managerial level. So who within this organization, hence this NGO, would be someone that would actually take value out of having a value exchange with you? And this may be kind of maybe the head of the group. This may, but this may be as well someone who's specialized in a very specific topic and maybe having an interest in having a conversation with you and having an exchange with you in the first place. The third part is we talk about strategy, right? You as a firm have a strategic intent. Hence, for example, you want to increase your market share, you want to break into a new market, you wish to kind of increase your marketing. So an NGO will always have an interest in wider exposure. This may not have anything to do with you because they may see you as a big enemy, but you can consider this obviously in the value exchange, right? So a bigger exposure and a conversation for an NGO with one of the market leaders as a firm may actually be something which they can capture a lot of value out of, because the members that are paying for them see this as something positive, that there's conversation going on, that they are involved, they're seen as a specialist as an organization. So this may be aiding a strategic intent, for example, of growth or whatever it is. And the fourth part and the last part is risk. If you think about 2 firms all working together, there's always risk involved. And if you reduce the risk, you will be having an open conversation. If you will increase the risk, you will have closed doors. So this is one thing to consider and to define how the risk change within this collaboration or this value exchange actually, how the risk influence actually changes within this value exchange. So these are really 4 levels. So on a firm level, on a managerial level, on a strategic level, on a risk level, that are value exchange always non-monetary, hence your NGOs and like kind of influencers and so on. I hope that that answered the question. It took a little bit longer than I was expecting, but instead of being in a room where I can see you and can see your face having a question mark, I can adopt my style and adopt the way I'm creating value for you. And obviously, I'm very keen for you to capture this value and use these tools within your firms to make your firms better and to have better business outcome in the future. And obviously then to come back and see more in IfM, because there's a lot of very interesting research going on, obviously, in the place, and there's a lot of very, very good outcome coming out of the place. I think this pretty much puts us 5 minutes longer than we were expecting, which is due to your good questions. Well done, everyone. And thanks very much for listening to me. And I'm very much hoping to speak to you soon. If there's any more questions, feel free to send me an email as well if you want to be in touch, or then as well download any of the papers at cambridgeservicealliance.eng.chem.ac.uk. You can find a lot of our papers. Thank you very much.